Hey everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at Temy. Temy is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. Each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. Our today's guest speaker is Deborah Acosta, who is CEO at WeAccel and co-host at Smart City Diaries Podcast. Beside these titles, Deborah is a community leader, feminist, government innovator, smart city ecosystem trailblazer, and public speaker. Hi, Deborah. How are you doing?
Good morning. This is a really good morning to be talking to you. The sun is shining here in California, which it hasn't been for a while. So thank you for inviting me to share my knowledge with the rest of and actually to learn from you as well, to learn from my audience. It's a really big part of what I do.
Thank you that you've made time to join us today. And unfortunately, today we don't have sunny weather, but I'm happy that you have at least. So before we jump into discussion of the WeAccel and also about Smart City Diaries, I want to share with our audience some kind of background information about these projects. So Smart City Diaries is a dynamic technology podcast and multimedia experience designed to educate, entertain, and engage a diverse audience, creating an open door into a living laboratory, our cities. And WeAccel is a women-owned consulting firm that helps cities create sustainably strong economies and works with employers to improve their ability to attract, retain, and advance women in their workplace. A lot of information and a lot of topics which I want to touch on during our interview. But I want to start with the question regarding time management, let's say, and how you your personal growth during managing your position in WeAccel as a CEO and also as a co-host. So how has being a CEO and co-host of a podcast impacted your personal and professional growth?
I have been pretty much a technician, involved in a technical world. So working for government, and prior to that, my own other entrepreneurial experiences and working with businesses I was kind of in that world of people who know each other and we all know the same truths. And when I started working with younger people, so when I left the city of San Leandro, where I was the chief innovation officer, and decided to start my own company, it was really with the understanding that I wasn't connecting with youth. In that job, I was not connecting to people who didn't really understand the world that we were building, the world around technology, the world around data, and hoping that the getting data back that was reliable and trustworthy would help us make better decisions. The regular world did not know, the community did not know this work was happening, and especially younger people. Yes, they work with their cell phones. Yes, they have technology. But what do we actually do with it that makes an impact in our world, not just communicating with my friends on TikTok, on Instagram and Facebook. And of course, Facebook, young people don't use anyway. So personally, I'd had no idea how hungry our millennial and Gen Z generations were for information. I didn't know that before. So that has really changed me personally. This changed my attitude towards my children. So sometimes, we boomers kind of think you guys are kind of spoiled. Yes, we did that to you by giving you everything, but come on. Now I understand it's a very different world that they grew up in. So personally, that's definitely what I learned. And then professionally, I learned something very important from a woman that I think many of us know, Brene Brown, where she said on one of her podcasts, "I'm here to get it right, not to be right." And I think as boomers, we too often think we're right? We were the big group of people that came out after World War II, and we did all these amazing technology inventions, and we moved forward a little bit. women and people of color, advance them, but we haven't done enough. So I'm here to get it right. And that's what I've really learned professionally and personally from this little adventure I'm on now.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because I'm the generation, I can say the accurate generation, but I was born in the end of last century. And I see nowadays that I have some difficulties with all of this information traffic, because there is a lot of information from different sources in social media. And it's sometimes in the end of the day, I feel that my head is just buzzing with information, and it's really hard to work with this. And so it's really great that you have such mission to educate younger generation. And so we smoothly move to my next question about Smart City Diaries. How did the concept for the podcast come about, and what do you hope to achieve through the podcast?
So I was approached. So I left the city of San Leandro in April of 2018. I'd been working with a documentarian by the name of Brandon Catcher of Lost Summit Films. Mm-hmm. He had done a number of documentaries, and especially the one that is my favorite, Truth is Beauty. So it was the story of this very large statue, 55-foot tall statue made out of 12,000 pounds of stainless steel mesh and 2,500 programmable lights. Her name is Truth is Beauty. She was one of 3 sculptures by the sculptor Marco Cochrane, and the messaging behind this statue was, what would the world be like if women were safe? She's literally 55 feet tall, nude, made out of stainless steel mesh, so you can literally see right through her, and she can be programmed with beautiful lighting. Mm-hmm. The story behind that was critical to my role as Chief Innovation Officer, believe it or not, because technology is not just about the technology. It's about the art that can be inspired by the technology, by making things, right? So that was inspiring to me. And then Brandon came to me and asked me, people don't really understand what smart cities are, what they mean. How about if we do a documentary series about smart cities? We go to smart cities all over the world and we examine them at the juncture of culture, mm-hmm. of geography, and of technology. And so basically, what are the people? How are the people merging with technologies? Oh, that's a great idea. Okay, let's do this. We raised money. We were able to film the very first documentary, or the very first pilot. 2020, we were out of the gate. We were marketing this concept, mm-hmm. and people in my world were loving this because it's like, oh my God, it makes us look cool, right? It's like these young, dynamic, myself and my daughter, actually, mm-hmm. my millennial Latina daughter, were the hosts, are to be the hosts of this. And of course, COVID hit, right? February 2020. I remember that last conference that we were at. People were so excited about what we were doing, mm-hmm. and then COVID hit. So our advisor said, okay, well, you're not going to be traveling for a while. Let's do a podcast. Okay. Because the idea was to engage with young people where they're at. Mm-hmm. And that's clearly YouTube, Instagram. So we started with the idea of a podcast where we would interview some people, but really the first season would be about teaching young people and people in general who want to know about the basics of things like mobility, how we had transportation, electricity, how does it get to our homes, broadband, what does data mean? What is broadband, and how does wireless work, and how does it get to our homes? Because it became clear to me that young people, I hear continuously, we just want to destroy everything. We want to take everything down. Okay, fine, but you should know what you're taking down first, because maybe there's some parts of that you can actually extract and make something useful out of. So that was the first season. Now we're looking for funding, but I find that we're actually morphing into something more powerful, which is storytelling for cities. So I think that's a pivot that might be made. I don't know if we'll continue with the podcast. We probably actually will, but in shorter form content, focusing more on Instagram. I'm kind of weird about TikTok, but I'm a boomer, so we'll see. Maybe my millennial daughter will like it more. But that's what it. So what I'm going to what I'm showing you is that we're taking our challenges, our failures, if you want, and we're learning to pivot. We're learning to be flexible and not to just stay stuck on a product that we thought we wanted in the beginning, but learning to work where our base is, right? So where our potential clients are, where our potential customers are.
Yeah, to be flexible is really important nowadays in business. And I've checked your website of your podcast and also watched some of the episodes. And so you've done about more than 100 episodes. And so it's a lot of information, and you have explored also some stories. You've invited some guests. And what role do you see technology playing in the future of cities based on that information that you've got? And how do you think it will impact the way we live and work?
Where do I begin? It's like, right, we just February that ChatGPT came out with AI, right? So let's just start with that, because there's so much I could talk about, but let's just start with that. The World Economic Forum has projected that by 2025, the globe will lose 85 million jobs due to robotics and AI. So that's between 2020 and 2025. So we're right in the middle right now. But we will gain 97 million jobs will be created. Who is going to fill those roles? We don't have enough people now to fill the jobs that we have in the United States, right? And U.S. residents don't want to take the jobs that immigrants often want to take, right? But we're not letting them in either to take those jobs. And in fact, we're willingly giving jobs. The New York Times did a report recently about how child labor is now creeping back into our U.S. factories because we don't have enough people to fill the jobs. So that technology right there, the biggest impact that will have on the world is right there, the advent of robotics and AI, because we're going to lose jobs, but we're going to create many more. Are we ready for those jobs? So that's the first thing. And technology has the ability to connect people. That was the promise of social media, right? And we definitely have seen how social media, Twitter, Facebook can actually galvanize people, especially in countries that are not democratic, and actually galvanize them to work together to get things done that address their priorities. And so that's very important. But we've also learned from social media is when you don't go in with rules and guidelines about how to use it effectively, we get the mishmash that we have today and the impact on mental health for young people, especially young women, etc. So we need to have guidelines, because technology is going to be everything to cities and to the world and how we survive climate change and how we communicate with each other. So, but we need to make sure that as we proceed, that we are preparing ourselves and not going blindly into this like we did with social media, because we know what can happen. We've got plenty of science fiction stories about AI and robots, right? Robots that we know where this could go. So let's plan for it now.
I want to say here that it's really pity, because most of the information about AI and that we lose our job, but not the less amount of the informational sources they tell about this rise of amount of positions of jobs. And it's really pity, because a lot of people have some fear that they will lose their job, and especially my generation. Friend of mine, she said, I'm really scared. I have no idea whom I gonna be, I don't know, in 10 years because of AI and ChatGPT. And so it's really important that you you understand and you try to teach our generation, and not only our generation, the people of all ages that actually
my generation.
Yes, it's really important just to use technology wisely, and that's it.
Exactly. And how it can help, technology can help predictive analytics, right? So the big thing is digital twins nowadays. We're now envisioning building cities or communities and recreating them digitally so that we can test. We can poke at things like what happens when there's an emergency over here and there's a flood over here. What can we do not only to help in that emergency, but what can we do today to prevent that emergency from happening? So that's going to be a very powerful and positive way. We can't run away from it. We shouldn't run away from it. We just need to create the right policies to make sure that we are being protected and we're entering to this wisely. Because data, the ownership of data, and oh my God, how you use that can be huge. It is huge. It's already huge, right?
Yes, can agree more with you. So we can move to the next question about the cities and how they actually promoting equity and social justice, and how can technology be used as a tool to achieve these goals as I said, in promoting equity and social justice?
I love that question. Okay, it's a little bit. I'm going to try to break it down easily, but the biggest. So DEI is not, diversity, equity, inclusion is not being addressed adequately by anybody almost anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. It isn't. And technology can make it worse because technology is only as good as the person programming it. And as AI continues to learn, right, machine learning, we have to make sure that it's learning things that are not harmful to us, but that it's learning things that really promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right. How do we do that? I mean, like, how do we get started with that? Maslow, I think most people are aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So there are 5 levels according to Maslow. There's many more, and you can argue about whether or not it's appropriate in every situation. But generally, the very first level is infrastructure, right? Foundational infrastructure, housing, food security, water security, access to broadband. Okay, that's a basic thing now. You can't even apply for a job if you don't have access to the internet anymore.
Yes.
So in order to really address DEI, we have to start it at the very basic level. We cannot have communities of color being singularly cut off from clean drinking water because some dude, in City Hall decided that was the most economical way to handle their challenges around clean water. We can't have that anymore. So priorities, cities for a while, our recommendation to cities is you focus your priorities first at that foundational level, because you're going to get a DEI much faster. If your residents are clearly taken care of in terms of housing and equity, water access, food water access, etc., broadband, public safety is therefore going to be a lot easier to address because people's basic needs will be taken care of. Mm-hmm. So that means that the folks in the hills who have been used to getting their potholes fixed first, maybe have to sit back for a minute, while the folks in the flatlands who haven't necessarily had their voices heard so much actually are the ones that get prioritized. So I believe that that's how cities need to approach their problem solving and their prioritizing. And we've developed at WeAccel a community hierarchy of needs. We're working with the federal government, with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and a private consortium called Global Cities Team Challenge, where we are working with NIST to develop what we call the key performance indicators, holistic key performance indicators. A lot of data stuff, right? How can we bring what the federal government wants to be able to measure so we can work towards, developing baselines and then being able to work towards improving things by measuring? How do we connect that with the needs of cities? So it is our recommendation to them, and the So it appears that NIST is going to be, has accepted the community hierarchy of needs as a way of identifying, allowing cities to identify their problems, their priority problems, and then identify the priorities to solving those problems. So identifying your problems, what are your priorities, and then how can technology help? So that's how I see it. But you've got to connect with people first. Otherwise, you get Toronto and Quayside. Are you familiar with that story? Yeah. So for our listeners who don't know, in 2017, the city of Toronto, Canada, put out an RFP for 12 acres to develop 12 acres on their waterfront. Mm-hmm. The winning respondent was Sidewalk Labs. It's a subsidiary of Google, Alphabet, who is the parent to Google. They decided they were going to build a smart city from the internet up, and they built it out. Except they didn't think to ask the residents of Toronto what they thought of it, and the residents uniformly said, "Where's our data? Who owns our data? How are you going to use our data?" And eventually, by 2020, Sidewalk Labs pulled out because they said because of COVID, the impacts of COVID. No, it wasn't, because the community killed it. Community said, we're not having this. So that's the lesson that cities need to learn. We need to engage with our communities first, find out what their priorities are, and then see how technology can help, not the other way around.
So you've shared with us the perfect formula, and what actually some challenges you may face during this implementation of this formula?
Lack of trust. Lack of trust between government and their constituents, the lack of generational trust, the lack of trust between women and men, especially where politics is concerned. It's just that the biggest challenge is the lack of trust. And I believe, and we believe, my team believes, that we need to start literally at the ground level again, building trust in communities where people, even especially where they have disagreements, are sitting there eyeball to eyeball, or perhaps using digital community engagement tools as well, and saying, these are my priorities. These are my priorities. Where's the connecting rod here between the two of these priorities? We can find that. We can find that, especially when you're dealing with community hierarchy of needs and you're dealing with baseline things. Well, who can disagree that anyone who's unhoused should be housed, right? That anyone who has mental illness should be getting the things that they need in order to address those needs. So I do believe that the lack of trust is the foundational building block that's needed for us to be able to adopt technologies, because people need to know why I'm doing it. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I don't trust you. I'm not going to do it. Or I do trust you. So
yes.
Yeah.
Open dialogue is really important. It's really important between the government and the authority, and in such a way you can gain actually this trust from them.
Yeah, that's the one thing. And even NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, figured it out. The number one thing to work on now is trust.
And I like that you've mentioned this topic about the trust, because I wanted also to ask you the question regarding the company WeAccel, where you are CEO. How does WeAccel work to build trust between generation and community? And you've already mentioned why it's important, but from the side, why is this important for creating sustainable and inclusive cities?
Because the globe is diverse. That means the potential customer base is hugely diverse. So if you just want to get down to bottom line for a company, right? The more customers you can appeal to, the better off the more sustainable your company will be. The more people that want to pay for your service. So diversity, equity, and inclusion it's also a company strategy. And so how do we start? Well, WeAccel. So the WeAccel is short for We Accelerate Women's Impact. And it's not just women. I started that idea based upon the Truth is Beauty statue. What would the world be like if women were safe? Well, we accelerate women's impact. The world will be a safer place for women and for all people if women are safe, right? So I have a young, very young team. I'm the oldest one in the team. I'm learning every day. And my youngest team member, Mary Celestin, is an engineer. She's also a community organizer, San Jose Strong, and she's 23 years old, and she's a young woman of color. So that's how you do it. You invite diversity onto your team. They check you. Oh, when you're wrong, and I've been checked badly. Oh, have I been checked badly? By my team. It's like you can't do, Debbie. You can't address young people like that. You come off looking stern and like you're a know-it-all. That's not the inquisitive way to learn, right? To learn from them or for them to learn from you, because you will shut them off. So you start with a young team. That's how WeAccel works. And then we work with cities and the highest levels of government really to engage communities in dialogue. So by having this young, diverse people on my team, everyone can see someone on my team in themselves. And I think that's the important part. When you look at government nowadays, can you really see yourself there? Sometimes, especially as a woman, quite often not. Quite often not. And as a young person of color, no. We've seen what happened here in the United States very recently when two young legislators from Tennessee, two young people of color, the youngest ones in the Tennessee legislature, were kicked out because they were not heard. Basically, they had to use bullhorns to be able to be heard, and then they were kicked out. So the point is we need to listen, and we need to include young people wherever they are in the conversation, because the future is theirs. We're going to be gone soon. And we left you with quite a challenge.
And as we touch the topic about the women, I'm facing on our podcast, I see that most of our guests are men, and I understand that I can count on one hand the women guests. And as you're an expert in this sphere, could you please tell us, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing women entrepreneurs today?
So two main challenges. First of all, we don't see ourselves. We're all over the place. You just said, Alexandra, that you have you can count on one hand the number of female entrepreneurs you've had on the show. It's not like we're not out there. We're out there all over the place. Why are men, especially white men, seen, especially if they have gray hairs, seen as the expert subjects on this? They're not. They're the expert subjects on the things that they're expert subjects in. But if they don't have the diversity on their team, if they're not able to have these conversations with people who have different objectives from them or different viewpoints, and I have this all the time because I'm dealing at the national level. And well, I love you guys, NIST, but you have a singular technology engineering focus that does not always, you're struggling to figure out how people fit into it, right? So that's why it's one of the biggest challenges that women face, is just being seen and then being heard, right? I can't tell you the number of meetings where myself or another woman at the table was saying, I had this idea, and then there's silence, right? Crickets. 5 minutes later, a guy will say something along that same line, and suddenly it's like, oh my God, voice from God. Yes, that's a great idea. So that's one thing. And then leading on to that, of course, is we need investor opportunities. I mean, there's so little, a small percentage of investment goes into women businesses. So it's, first of all, we need to be seen. And then second of all, we need money to help grow our businesses. I mean, I could go a lot deeper than that, but we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing this. And as we've talked a lot already about the education, and do you feel that in the whole world, not only in the United States, there is a lack, of some topics, of some subjects in education system, which can be really helpful to build these smart cities and touch on the topic regarding innovation and the sustainability?
It should start in preschool. I mean, we need to be teaching not only entrepreneurial, that word, but also entrepreneurial opportunities. So in other words, teaching people that even if you're working for someone else, that you should have an entrepreneurial mindset about it. So looking for ways, because I know that Applied Fusion, one of our fabulous companies here in San Leandro that actually fuses diverse metals together that normally are not seen as able to be diffused, affixed to each other. My God, in space, you can imagine that the kind of work that they had. But he said that what really matters is the little innovations that happen on the floor every day. That's what makes a difference. That if he had a workforce that just did their job, he would not be the success that he is today. Mm-hmm. So that is really important. And education needs to start as early as possible, not high school. Now you got to choose your career. It's too late then. Remember that figure, 85 million jobs will disappearing, 97 million jobs will appear. Are we educating our kids to prepare for this future? The answer is no, we're not. And we need to change that very quickly. So I could talk about that too for all the things that I'm thinking about here and what we're doing in terms of entrepreneurialism, attracting it to San Leandro, what I work to do, especially around robotics and AI. We got to get it to be just a familiar thing that people just work with every day so that they're familiar with its challenges and with its opportunities.
Yes, I believe also that a lot of talks about entrepreneurial instinct, but I believe that if you are a child and your parents, just school and college, if they teach you in the right way, if they give you the right information and how you can use it, so it's your entrepreneurial instinct. It just can't switch on in some moment. You cannot be born with it. You can be taught.
Exactly.
I believe.
Exactly. And let me just, right there. For women, that is not taught to us that we're able to do that, right? Little boys are said, oh, you can do whatever you want in life. But little girls are not taught that. So we're not taught to dream about those things. If you don't dream about those things, it's going to be hard to make it happen. You have to really, really want it. And so I think that for women, being entrepreneurs is really the only way we're going to change things. Because it's too hard to get into a big company like IBM or any of those others and try to change the culture. Let's change the culture ourselves by creating our own companies.
Yeah, it's really, really important topic. And I believe that we can maybe sometime record another one episode podcast, because it's a really important topic. And I also believe that our audience all over the world will be eager to learn about this from our podcast.
I'd love to have that conversation.
Okay, and we are about to finish our interview. It's only about 2 questions left, and one of them, I want to hear your story about how you're mixing journalism, I mean podcast hosting, and your approach to entrepreneurship. Does it hard, and what actually are the results?
You know, it's about storytelling. If you can't tell a story, most people will have a difficulty accessing the information you're trying to share. So my background is I'm actually a English major from UC Berkeley. So I've always been fascinated with the written word from the earliest times. My nose was always buried in books, right? What I realized not too long ago was that love of books. So you start off with an introduction, and then you introduce the characters, and then you introduce the tension, whatever the storyline is. And then as the reader goes along, you're connecting the dots. Oh, this happened to them in their childhood, and so now this is how they're seeing things, or this other actor over here they didn't know about was okay. And now, so the storyline begins to become revealed to you. I'm a dot connector. So that's what I do. I connect the dots. I see a world that others don't see because I'm able to connect those dots. And what is it Steve Jobs said at his last Stanford when he was talking to the graduates? The world belongs to those who connect the dots. And I'm very grateful that I'm one of those people. So how does my journalism fit in with entrepreneurship and business strategy? It's everything. It's storytelling. That's it. I can't break it down more succinctly than that. Everyone has a story. Everyone really wants it told. They don't know how to tell the story. From cities to government, cities, people, Milena and Olga and her granny and Mafusa the cat, right? On their journey from Ukraine, everyone has a story, and if you tell the story, there can be geopolitical impact on that. So that's what I'm about. I'm a storyteller.
It's really nice metaphorism, I can say. I don't know.
Yeah.
If there is such a word in English, you're connecting the dots. It's like an artist with the paintings.
It's kind of like conducting an orchestra. That really is what it feels like. And you pluck the string over here and you hope this sound comes out, but it won't necessarily be reflected by the instruments on this side. So you have to pull this in. And thank you. I've never thought about that before. It's very apt. Very apt, really. Alessandra. Thank you.
Okay. And on this positive moment, I want to ask my last question. What would you advise to the first-time entrepreneurs and people who are only at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey?
If you're at the beginning, think about whether the world really needs your product, right? Think about it from a triple bottom line approach. How does your product impact people, right? Including any employees that you might have. So your customer base, how does it impact them? Is it what they need? How does it impact the environment? I mean, if you think about AI, a glorious new tool, but the energy that's required to store all of this data and to create, to fuel the machines that are doing all of this thinking, it's extraordinary. And we're going through periods of climate change right now modern history we've not experienced. I believe in the past we've experienced it, but not in modern history. So, and then profit, because you got to be sustainable. So is it, goes back to, does the world really need your product, or is this just a boy toy that you're fiddling around with, right? We've seen a lot of that in Silicon Valley. So triple bottom line first, think about that. Be prepared to fail frequently and learn from it. Pivot. Don't give up. Pivot. Again, you're here to get it right, not to be right. And then diversity, equity, inclusion has to be part of your company ethos right from the get start if your company is to thrive. I'm talking about thriving and sustaining. If you just want to create a company with your bros, okay, good luck. You might be able to succeed given that all of the Silicon Valley investor bros are also out there looking for you to invest in. But it won't necessarily be sustainable. And if you want a legacy, which I believe most women do, we want legacies, we're not trying to figure out how to sell it in 5 years, then that's the kind of company you should be thinking about, not how to spin it off in 5 years.
Okay, so to sum up, you need to be ready to fail, you need to have this equity, sustainability, and also, of course, to find the right product market fit. Thank you. Thank you for this advice, Deborah. And thank you for our dialogue. I was really happy to see you today. And I believe that we are gonna keep in touch and one day record one more episode.
I hope so. And the fact that you are in Ukraine, I love this. And as we talked about before the show started, so many potential connections there. And Smart City connections. So if there's any way that you can see a connection for me to work there with you, yes, let's do it.
I would be happy. I would be happy to help you.
Okay, good. So I may Yeah. So I don't know whether you want to include this, but I may ask you to be part of a podcast too, because I love the fact that you're in Ukraine and you can make so many connections for the kind of things that we're working on.
Oh,
So
sure. It is.
thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah.